Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you with this little guy right here. This is the Ferrum Forge / Massdrop Falcon. First off, though, I want to thank Massdrop in the name of full disclosure. They sent this little guy along for me to just check it out, give him some feedback, but they didn't even necessarily need me to do a full review, but I told them if I do a review, it's going to be the full, good, great, bad, and the ugly. It's going to be an honest review. They still sent it, and in fact, they told me to keep it. So I'm going to review it and then sell it and donate the proceeds to charity. So thank you very much to Massdrop for that. And it's actually worth noting, why the heck is Massdrop involved? Well, this is new. This is the very first of a series of efforts by Ferrum Forge and Massdrop working with Wee Knives. But I think for Massdrop in general, they're wanting to get into, previously they sold other people's knives. Now they're trying to get into commissioning their own knives and selling those. And it's a new effort. And I think it's this is another one of their efforts coming up. This is the This is a production prototype. So no review coming immediately on that. I can't really review a prototype very well. But nonetheless, it's a new effort from them, and they seem to be doing it right, at least so far, and so that's great. Next thing, size comparison here. This is not a big knife, particularly. Right here it is against your Spyderco Delica, so in terms of usable blade, you're right in the same sort of vicinity. Here it is, Spyderco PM2. Let's see here, Ontario Rat number 1. And your steel wheel cut jack in 3.5 inch, and the Ontario Rat number 2. Why not? There we go. So that is the Ferrum Forge Massdrop Falcon. Of course, you already know who Ferrum Forge is, if you are a knife guy who's watched the channel, or gal for that matter. But they're a very good set of designers out of San Diego, California. And this is being built by Wee Knives, who makes very great knives with very terrible screws. But luckily, they used real ones this time. So anyways, let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this interesting new collaborations product, the Falcon. So, on the good side, this guy has a great little size. I like very much, this is coming in right at about 3 inches on the blade. And that's at that range where you get enough blade to get things done, but not so much blade that it starts becoming illegal in a bunch of places. This is a nice, non-intimidating size for actually getting things done, and so I appreciate that they went smaller, whereas Ferrum Forge's stuff tends to be usually pretty big, and their small stuff tended to be pretty not impressive. So I love seeing them target this and do it well. Next thing, speaking of Ferrum Forge is usually great on ergonomics, and indeed this is no exception. With one small exception, this knife feels just great in the hand. It feels great, it locks in. There's a lot of good here, ergonomically speaking, and in my smaller hands, this fits me like a glove. And so absolutely great to go in terms of that. And also, it's going to be great in slick conditions, because it relies less on the materials themselves, which, given have some gription to them, but are very, it's locked in there. So that's great. Next thing, the blade on this guy is solid. It's S35VN, which is a great steel, one of my very favorites. Has a nice blend of, wear resistance, edge retention, so to speak, and sharpenability, and it's a nicely done blade for actually cutting things. Could be a little thinner behind the edge, but you know what? It slices. There's not a big problem, and it came reasonably sharp. So that's very good. Next thing, the build quality on the whole is actually pretty impressive for this guy. It's got lots of really nice chamfers all over. For instance, on the inside of the scales, that's a nice little detail you don't often see. It's got very good centering. It's got using an actual backspacer, which is very nice. It's using a milled clip. We'll come back to that later, but that's evidence that they gave a damn. They're even using things like ceramic bearings, ceramic detent balls. All of these signs show me that they weren't just trying to make a knife as cheaply as possible, but they were trying to make a good knife at a good price. And so that's very good. And it's not surprising from Wee Knives, because that's usually, they do incredible work, but it's nice to see that no one was trying to put the squeeze on this and as a result hurting the quality. So that's good. The action on this guy, by the way, is great. This is a Wee Knives high-end action. Nice hard detent. Fires 100% reliably. Very nice detent, and it's worn in very nicely. I am not complaining at all about this action. It's not super, oh my god, fall shutty, but you know what? Not a big deal. This is absolutely a great action, 100%. Then finally on the good side, something maybe a little bit more ephemeral, but that's that Massdrop is supporting this knife well. I was very skeptical when this first came out because, as I said in my my disassembly, I had had some really negative experiences with Massdrop early on in the company. And indeed, I heard some things. But the thing is, I had some buddies who had issues with this knife. Every knife will have issues. That's a simple case. But they had, major problems. They talked to Massdrop, and Massdrop sent them a new knife, no questions asked. That's the kind of support you want to see, and that was what I was afraid of. In the past, Massdrop has just been kind of a warehouse, we will drop ship stuff from the manufacturer through you kind of an affair. I didn't know how they do it supporting a knife, but so far they seem to be doing great. And so that removed one of the variables, the fact that they are putting in good customer service to people who buy knives that they specifically are making. That makes this a whole lot more reasonable and decent to do than I thought it might be at first. So that's good, that they seem to be doing good customer service and they stand behind the product even when there are issues. So to me, all that is the good, is that Massdrop is supporting the knife well. The action's great. The build quality is very good. The blade is great. The ergonomics are good and the size is great. Let's talk about what else is great here. The great. So, to me, what's great about this knife is the value. This is $125 in the latest drop of them. I think it was a little cheaper for the first run. But look, this, even at that price point, represents a pretty compelling value because you're getting here a titanium frame block flipper. You're getting it with a very, very good action, which is good. You're getting a good blade steel, S35VN, actually a great blade steel. Let's be real here. You're getting good build quality from WE Knives. And you're not seeing cut corners, which is the big thing. Generally, when they're trying to get something priced down, you end up seeing, we'll skip that. No, this is by and large a very nicely made knife. And so, to me at least, that is great. You are paying, $125 for an S35VN titanium frame lock with a great action and a great ergonomic design. That's a great value to me, and so that's what's great. Let's talk about what's not so great, the bad. Okay, so on the bad side, first off, a couple of Ferrum Forge's common sins have followed them into the real world, so to speak, out of their custom division. And first off, the scales are completely uninspiringly finished. They have eliminated the natural beauty of the material, in this case with a very strong sort of blasting. It gives it a nice texture for sure, but the thing is, it's staying in your hand even without the texturing. So I would have preferred to see something that doesn't snail trail quite as regularly and shows off a little bit more of the natural beauty of the titanium. Not a big deal, but it's a deal. Speaking of Ferrum Forge's sins, the blade stock on this is way too thick. If we compare this to, say, the Spyderco Delica, we can see that, holy crap, this knife is thicker than it needs to be. This is Ferrum Forge's, modus operandi, so to speak, in the past. It's why I've never liked their small knives. Luckily, I think that they're growing. In fact, in the Gent, which is in the same collaboration, you can see they're using a reasonable stock thickness for a knife of a reasonable. And so the Gent is much better in this way, but the Falcon, as a result, is thicker behind the edge than it needs to be because of that insistence on super thick stock. Next thing, I gotta say, I'm not a fan of how close the edge is to the back of the knife here. It's not as dangerous as some, to be sure, but it's absolutely right there, and it is something that, as I was carrying this guy, I was always a little concerned with my relatively small pinky finger there, that I was going to cut myself up on the outside there. Anytime you have a tall blade and a small knife, that becomes a risk, and usually Ferrum Forge doesn't fall victim to that, and so that's a little unfortunate here. Next thing, this guy absolutely has a prominent flipper tab. It helps that they're using a little bit of a cutaway here to make this guy hide a bit more, but this is a prominent pocket pecker, and it's also a little hooky at the top here. I'll see if I can zoom in and show you this. You can see this very top one has definitely got a little bit of a rawr thing going on to it. And as a result, it's not super comfortable on the finger. It's not as bad as some other knives, like the CKFP's Duke and whatnot, but this is absolutely... that's a little hooky. And so if I was keeping this guy, I'd be taking a Dremel to that just to make this a little more comfortable to flip. Then finally, on the bad side, the lanyard hole area is just not great to me. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but this didn't need a lanyard hole, and the way they threw one in there had major consequences, so to me at least, this feels like a lazy lanyard hole. It's just like, well, we gotta put one in there. Well, I guess we'll make a cutter. Like, no, not every knife needs a lanyard hole, and this one would be way better without. So anyways, that's the bad to me. It's that the lanyard hole is really unimpressive and kind of breaks up an otherwise attractive design. It has a pocket pecker for sure. It's got the edge a little close to the back. The scales are uninspiringly finished. The stock is way too thick, Ferrum Forge confirmed, and then the Massdrop logo is absolutely, totally freaking huge, way beyond reason. Let's talk about what's ugly here. On the ugly side, to me, the only real ugly issue here is this area in the back here. This is the reason I hate this lanyard hole so much. You can see here that in this region, and again, I'll try and zoom in, there are all of these unchamfered edges here. Right here and right here, it's just not great. And as a result, every time you hold this knife, you are feeling hot spots off of this area, off of the sides of the clip, off of all of this. This whole region here just is a festival of things that are not chamfered well enough, and that's just not great. A knife that is otherwise very nicely rounded and very ergonomic in this little area here, because they had the K to the lanyard, folks, ends up being just a pain in the neck. And so you have these hot spots back here that just don't need to be there. And this is a good reason why spring clips, where you have, instead of a sculpted piece of metal here, you have just a flat piece, have a major advantage, because you can have this part be low and then have it slope up a little bit. But this whole region here, the lanyard hole and the clip, is just hot spot city, and it doesn't need to be. And so I really, really wish that they had just foregone the lanyard hole, giving them the ability to round this whole area off, because the knife on the whole would be absolutely an ergonomic masterpiece, as opposed to right now where it is just ergonomically solid. That's your uglies. This whole region is unfortunately pretty ugly and needs to be addressed, ideally in a future iteration. Let's talk about final conclusions here. Look, final conclusion, this is a very nice knife. It's very solid. It's got very good build quality. It's a very nice ergonomic design from Ferrum Forge. And it's got great steel, a great blade. I mean, there's a lot to love about this guy. It absolutely has some issues, too, with the Ferrum Forge thick blade stock, the hooky prominent flipper tab, and it is hotspot city in the back here. That should have been vetoed. But the thing is, it's pretty damn good, and the value is pretty good, too. For $125, this is a small flipper frame lock in titanium made by We Knives, designed by Ferrum Forge. That is nice. And even though there's a lot of competition at $125, you could get a PM2, you could get a Delica, you could get a Griptilian, you could get a whole bunch of excellence at $125. This is a pretty compelling item to think about in that sort of range. I do think, though, that a second generation with a little bit of extra chamfering love in the back here, or just eliminating this whole source of pain altogether, as well as, addressing a couple of those other issues, would be even more interesting. But in some ways, my thought and my feeling on this is that this is sort of Ferrum Forge getting their sea legs in the collaboration, kind of figuring out how all of this works and how to best work with We. And this is evidenced by the Gen, which is, like I said, this is a prototype, but they've fixed a lot of the issues here. They've gotten rid of hot spots. They're using a better clip in this case. They're using much thinner blade stock. The logos are smaller. I see a great deal of learning that has gone on between this knife and the Gent up here. And so this is making me actually very, very hopeful. And it makes me feel like a lot of the issues in the Falcon are them working out early kinks in this new method of design and working for them. And so, there's a lot of hope here, even if there are some issues. But the thing is, even with those issues, the Falcon is still a pretty solid choice. And, for $125, you can do a lot worse. And this is really good evidence that this Massdrop Ferrum Forge We collaboration is going to be a serious force to watch in the production knife world on that lower end. And so I hope they keep it up, and I hope that the next entry solves these issues and so forth, because then in a couple of years they're going to be putting out some incredible freaking stuff, and they're already pretty close. So anyways, hope this has been interesting, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.